specifically inflation as it relates to the printing of money. Not that that's been going on at all. A lot of people say, oh, well, why does it matter? We can just print more money. My own grandma says that. Bless her heart. It's dumb. The problem with printing money is that it doesn't actually increase the value of money or the amount of wealth within a nation. The thing is that money is a supply and demand market like any other, and that if there's too much of it, the value of the money will go down. What that ends up causing whenever you print a bunch of money is it devalues your money to add that value to the newly printed money. When the government does that and then uses that money to give out handouts or bailouts or any other program that you can think of, even just to pay its debts. The problem with that is that it is a tax that it's a secret tax. It's a sneaky tax.
So one question that I would have is, what would you have to say about modern monetary theory, if you even know what that means or what that is?
Oh, is that the modern theory that we can just continue to have debt and we can continue to print money and it just doesn't matter?
Basically, I think it's a little bit more nuanced and there's a whole lot more caveats than what I'm explaining as to what the progressives believe on that front. But that's essentially my understanding of it is.
The problem with that is that the debt doesn't matter until it does. And what happens is when the debt does matter, when people call on their debt to get paid by America, obviously it's like any other debt program. You end up going into essentially forced austerity means mass firing of employees from the government, which I would be all for, but it does more than that. It instantly gets rid of welfare programs whenever they do austerity means. And while I am okay with less welfare, the instant turnover of welfare would just end up being horrible in results. The printing of money, too, ends up affecting that. And it's just a bad idea to print money, and it's a bad idea to ignore debts because eventually consequences do result.
There is one question that comes to my mind. The idea of Reaganomics was that you decrease taxes so that everybody would increase their wealth and also at the same time get on a higher tax bracket, thus increasing overall tax revenue for the government to pay off more programs, but also taking less of people's money on a percentage individual basis. And one of the things that comes to my mind is that is inevitably going to end up requiring some amount of printing, or at least that's my thought anyways. I do not know if you want to kind of correct me on that thought.
Well, Reaganomics specifically is actually, it's not itself an economic idea or policy, other than it is a microeconomic idea. As you mentioned, cutting taxes will increase people's general wealth by enabling them to use it how they see fit more, which, people aren't stupid for the most part. They're going to do what's in their best interest with their money, and that'll eventually increase their wealth. And like you said, get them into a higher tax bracket. The thing about that is it will require the printing of money eventually, like you said, just because wealth has increased. But it's kind of what you have to do anyway, because currently our money is not backed by any physical item. And people are like, oh my God, the money's not backed. Well, the money is backed by something, and it's backed by physical wealth of a country. Your dollars represent houses, it represents cars, sandwich meats, all that stuff, right?
I guess it's understandable. So basically, there's inevitably going to be required some small amount of printing because the more that population grows, the more that the more currency is going to be required by people in order for them to get along in life, to make essential purchases and even luxury purchases for that matter. It's just that you don't want to do it too much to where you just end up having a hyperinflation within the next 10 or 20 years or within a short time span in general.
Right. And, the other thing is that the government could not print money other than to replace damaged or broken money, stuff like that, which would cause the dollar value to increase. So instead of the dollar being worth $1, it'd be worth $1.50 or $2. But the problem with that is eventually you're working down, like an item that cost $1 could eventually cost 50 cents, could eventually cost, a penny. And so there is an issue in that. The reason that printing money as wealth increases doesn't cause inflation is that its supply is meeting demand, just like any other economic principle. And that's the issue we're running into these days with the constant printing of money and just handing out of quote unquote wealth. It's literally just redistributionism through devaluing the dollar. That has knock-on effects like we're seeing today with, I think eggs went up like 5% in value in cost, 10%, I think. It's a lot. And lumber going up 200%. And the biggest issue in all of this that we are seeing today is that the American financial system is unreliable in that you can't guess what it'll do in 4 years because it'll change presidents, and then who's in charge of the fiscal policies will change. Then they'll come out with something radically different. Whenever you have unreliable policies, the issue is that rich people will, and you can't blame them because the policies are unreliable, they'll put their money into physical assets such as gold and silver and whatnot. And what that does is it takes the money out of the economy, not even the money, the wealth, but it takes it out of the economy and makes it literally sit there, Scrooge McDuck style. And then it doesn't create wealth for a country. And banks are less likely to give out loans, or they'll have higher interest on their loans, which make people less likely to get a loan. And therefore, people are less likely to increase their wealth through taking risk, business risk and whatnot.
With that point mentioned, are you essentially against the gold standard, or, like I said, am I misunderstanding you?
I'm against the gold standard for modern times, simply because it cannot represent the amount of wealth that we have, because the amount of gold you would need is insane. And just the reality is we'd have to be going to war with countries to get their gold. Just the sheer amount of gold you would need to represent Elon Musk alone is insane. I wish there was a way, maybe there is, to have non-physically backed money that was more reliable. Well, there is a way, which is, don't constantly change your monetary policies, but that just ain't going to happen in today's world. Ben Shapiro was saying that we'll see inflation in 3 or 4 years, but we're seeing inflation now. But the reason he was saying that is because of the fact that he was expecting the economy to boom, which a booming economy increases wealth, obviously, which combats the effect of inflation. When the economy grows, it's like catching up, or it's staying steady with the inflation rate. But eventually, with the sheer amount of money they printed, the inflation rate would overtake the increase in wealth through the economy growing. But then obviously the government did the very stupid thing of paying people to be unemployed. And instead of paying for unemployment, they paid people to be unemployed. And so we're seeing inflation today. I think in April, it was April. Inflation went up something like 4.12% in total. And I'm willing to bet more than that because they never take in the total economy when doing inflation tracking. So what that directly translates to is that your $1 is now 4 cents less valuable.
Like, I actually got listening into some videos about modern monetary theory Tuesday during work. Some of the implication that I get from it is that there has to be a correlating productivity within society with the amount of money that is being printed. But the thing is, nowadays, for the past like 20, 30, even 40 years for that matter, we haven't had a correlating productivity that is parallel with the amount of printing that goes on in our economy. So therefore,
that's actually very interesting why that is. You ever looked into why they constantly cause inflation these days?
Why? No, I haven't.
Well, the reason was because the Great Depression was actually caused by deflation originally, and then it was caused by hyperinflation. Now, some inflation is good, as I mentioned, but these days we see rates of like 4 or 5% over a year. The thing about inflation versus deflation is that deflation effects on the economy happen pretty much instantly, and you cannot combat it by printing money or redistributing money or anything, because deflation is caused when the wealth of a nation decreases, whereas inflation happens when the supply of money increases. But as an economy improves and gets richer and wealthier, it at least keeps up to an extent with inflation. Hyperinflation is when you get like Venezuela stuff where they just print money. And that's what we're having these days. And the problem with that is it creates bubbles in the economy. some people don't understand what a bubble in the economy is. So the thing is that they're creating a bubble right now through the printing of money by making the money itself the bubble, and it is already correcting through inflation. But nowadays, now with them taking off the mask mandates and encouraging even blue states to open up jobs again, what we're going to have is a bubble in the value of money itself once the economy starts to rack back up again. In that, because wealth is being created, which wealth isn't even like the issue is that it's artificially opening up the economy. But anyway, as wealth is created through the creation of goods and the application of services, the services are a wealth. It acts the exact same way. But as that happens, the wealth of the nation will increase and the inflation rate will be going up, but it'll basically be going up at the same rate until eventually the wealth rate stops being increased so rapidly because we're coming out of this artificial depression. And when the wealth rate starts increasing at a normal rate, the inflation rate will continue to increase at the rate that it is. And that's when the value of the money bubble will start popping. And when that happens, eggs will suddenly be worth $5 or something like that. Like nobody can say what they'll actually be worth, but that's going to happen. It's already happening now because the government's artificially keeping people from working. But once the wealth rate increases, it's gonna look like we're done, like we're on smooth seas again. But we're not. That's going to happen eventually. And when that does happen, it will be very bad because keep in mind, hyperinflation is what caused the riots in Venezuela, which have riots and uprisings like every other month. And we're going to have more riots again simply because people won't be able to eat. And as evil as Lenin was, he was absolutely correct when he said that all it takes for a nation to crash is 3 missed meals.
Damn, that's quite the quote there.